Okay, I think we're going to get started. Welcome everyone to this session on registries for Inspire. Sorry, my name is Michael Lutz. I work for the European Commission's Joint Research Center. I'm going to be presenting as well as the second speaker, but first of all we have Walther from Germany. It's going to be presenting about the ISO 19135 compliant SDI registry implementation in Germany, I guess, right? Please.
So hello everyone, thanks for the introduction. I have prepared some 20 slides. I hope we have enough time. So let me just give you some overview of my talk, how the project is started, and of course we have a closer look to the ISO standard and our implementation. Then I will tell you something how we try to minimize the administration overhead of the registry and have a look to the namespace register. So as you can see, our project was very well prepared. It took 3 years at least for the pre-operating study, and it ended in creating a prototype to evaluate technical issues and more. And we decided to make the development not in-house, so there was a call for bids prepared, and the development started last September. And during the study, use for registers were identified. The first 4 ones are part of the actual recent development. For the schema register, we decided, because of a few less complexity, that we just set up a website and do a version control by using the Git version control system. For the CRS registry, we are undecided how to deal with it. There has to be work done. Other registries or registers are thinkable, for example, for terms of services or SLD information. So, of course, our registry will be compliant to the ISO 19135 standard, and of course to Inspire regulations and SDI standards in Germany. Because we want the users to use our registry, the web interface must be user-friendly and, of course, multi-language. For those who use machine-to-machine communication, we have 2 APIs prepared. The first one is SOAP-based, which covers everything for management processes and data, and REST interface just for querying the data. The content is fully version controlled, and we decided not to use version numbers but timestamps. So you can query the content on a historic view if you just add a timestamp to your request. It showed it's more easy to handle code lists using timestamps than version numbers. In operational mode, the registry will fulfill the quality of service identically to the catalog services. That means 99% availability, at least 30 parallel requests per second, and then response within 3 seconds. So the ISO standard focuses on how to deal with a registry, how to manage a registry. And there are 4 processes defined. First is the addition, how to get new data into the registry. The second one is the clarification. You have to be very careful with this. That's only to correct spelling errors. If there's a semantic change of data, you have to supersede an item, so that there's a connection between ancestor and successor, and anyone can see what's happened to this item. If an item is not needed anymore, it can be retired, but it's accessible by the registry system. If you query the historic state using timestamps, it's living again, and if you query the recent state, it's not present anymore. The ISO is independent of technology. If you use paper or Excel or someone else, it works for any kind of method you choose. There are roles defined by the ISO standard. There are 4 major roles. The first one is the submitter, second is manager, control body, and register owner. Quite important one is the submitter. He initiates all the processes I mentioned, and of course he has to talk to the control body to get an agreement, and if an agreement fails, he may start an appeal to get his decision reviewed. If a proposal is fed into the registry, the register manager comes into charge. He's responsible for checking is the submitter allowed to change the certain part of the registry, and who's the control body. Also, there are some formal checks done. Is everything filled in correctly? And the manager also cares for communication between the participants. If everything's okay from a formal point of view, then there is a professional review of this proposal that's done by the control body. And as you can see, this must not be one person, it can be many. And the control body may change the proposal. She should talk to the submitter before to get an agreement on the proposal. If the control body decides not to accept the proposal, as I said, the submitter can start an appeal, and the last role is the owner. He has the ultimate decision. There's a final decision, there's no discussion left. He says yes or no and finish. So in real life there are 2 important steps. First, there's a social issue. We have to explain to people why they should use a registry with this management overhead. And in fact, it's many people using registers already, but in a more informal way. They send an email to someone and he updates the vocabulary or something. And so it's sometimes hard to find people for the role control body. If you have committed people, there's no problem. If not, you have to ask many people. The second one is the role of the register manager is quite boring. So we just replace it by software. The software can check for formal correctness and check who's responsible. In order to do this, we have to extend the data model. There's the nucleus of the ISO process, and on this our GDI registry classes rest on. There's a possibility to build the role of the register manager in software. The role is still active. For example, if the control body wants a change of the proposal, the software as a role register manager executes the change. Our registers rest on this, and so we are able to extend the data model to add more fields. For example, for the organizations register, there has to be a complete address, and the ISO standard just offers a few data fields. So the implementation is done by the Frankfurt University of Applied Science. They have very experienced developers, including René Thiel, who did a lot of work in registry context. The software is open source based and has a web interface which is capable for serving smartphones and standard computers. We decided to be very flexible during the development, so nearly every day there's a software update which is tested and rolled out on our development systems. They are also online. If you're interested in, I can give you the URIs. And when the software is finished, it will be released under the free BSD free clause license. That means anyone can get the software, anyone can change the software, but you may not call it DE Registry. You just have to choose another name. Okay, some words for the administration overheads. In Germany we have a federal structure, and every stakeholder should care for his every first branch for itself. So we define that control bodies may act on their level, and also the registration process is done online by email. Every user who registers at the service must choose an organization he belongs to. And the point of contact of the organization has to authorize this user to act as a submitter or control body. Furthermore, all content is public. You don't need to register to access the data inside the registry. Also, all historic information is transparently offered, and also the management information, when what time an item was added or changed and who did it, is also transparently on the website. So, some words for our namespace register. It's close to finish. Of course, the namespace register should provide unique IDs, and also our namespace register reflects the federal structure of Germany. There are several control bodies, several submitters, and we implemented a redirect service on top of the namespace register to make the IDs resolvable. And in order to do this, we have a service. Here, if you call this URI now, you will get an error. This is a system that's on a version, it's not the latest one. And we just prefix the namespace, which is here de.bund.bkg, with the address of the registry service, plus this ID information that cares for namespace, and at a local ID. Inside the registry, there's a pattern that replaces this request by anything you like. In this case, this is a CSW request. You can see the local ID is inserted into the request, and but it can be anything you like. It can be a redirect to a code list or to a list of any database query you like. The main purpose we see is to use these IDs for metadata IDs, so that if you request this, if you open this ID, then you get the metadata itself. So I think I have time for some screenshots. This is our start page. You can see it's not fully translated yet, but it's available online in the test system. You can log in and register already. There's also an email sent out for verification. You shouldn't use example at example.org. And you can browse the content. As you can see, there are only 3 namespaces yet. And you can have a look at the details of the namespace. For example, the namespace is BKG, and the parent namespace is DE for Germany, and there are currently no sub-namespaces. And some part of the pattern I mentioned is visible at the bottom of the site, and that's a very flexible way to get the redirect service done. If you have the rights, you have 2 buttons. You can propose a new namespace, or you can supersede one. And if you fill in everything correctly, the register manager is happy, the software is happy, then the proposal is approved and waits for approval by the control body. The person who's responsible for this namespace gets an email if he wants. If he does not, we can disable the email information. Then he can have a look at the details for what's the name of the register, what's the purpose of the register. That's here a test case, of course, and there are 2 ways of dealing with it. You can accept it or you can decline it. Fortunately, it's in German, this website, but I think green and red is obvious. Okay, let's come to the outlook. We set up a working group in January who cares for transferring the processes into real life, and the next register to be done is the codeless register. Especially we focus there for interoperability to other registries, namely the Inspire registry. And during development we noticed that our organization's register needs improvement, and a big block to come is the Inspire monitoring register. There the people can register their metadata IDs and automatically this metadata is fetched and tested by the test suite of the German SDI. There is very important, we have an optimized workflow for the users. They use Excel sheets until now, and we have to have some benefits for the user that they cancel Excel lists and use our registry. So, thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Markus. I think we have time for a few questions before we go on to the next speakers. Any questions in the room? No? I have one. There's one. Sorry, Martin.
Of course him.
Of course him.
Of course he has a question. Yeah, we had a lot of email contacts last weeks.
Don't worry, just one generic. What I understood, this register is really dedicated to geospatial domain. Am I right? Or it's forcing to be oriented to support the geospatial content and functionality. I was wondering whether on the national level, in connection to the e-government initiative, you have some discussion how to link this type of register and services behind with the other digital, not only spatial content. The question is because, for example, in Slovakia, we have ongoing discussion about how to set up overall registers and registry services across the various domains. I was wondering whether there is some similar initiative in Germany, and if so, if there is some common understanding and way forward.
In Germany is quite complex. We are federal. There are other registries rolled out, but as our development focus on the geographic information. But from technology point of view, you can use it for anything you like. There are various output formats to be defined, and most existing registries are some content centered, and that's an informal way to change the information inside. And we focus first on the management side. And from data point of view, it's not be difficult to enhance this.
I have another question. I find it quite interesting what you presented about the namespace register that does the redirect to the WFS, or well, basically to another service, basically for downloading. I could imagine if that basically is rolled out on the whole German scale, it could create a bottleneck if you have that redirect just in one place. Have you done any testing on that, or have you considered that?
No, we are quite sure that we just do the redirect. We don't fetch the data and deliver it to the customer. We do the redirect. Also, this is some simple HTTP redirect. There should not be much overhead. Okay. We'll see.
Okay. Thanks again. And you told me you have a question at the end, so I'll bring you up at the end again for a question to everybody. That brings us to our second speaker, which is me. Okay, I would like to present to you some updates about the Inspire registry and show to you what we have done the last few months in rolling out a new version of the underlying software and of the service that is available for testing. And if you're interested in that, afterwards come to me and pick up one of those flyers, and I'll explain about that in a minute. So, as I said, I will give an overview of what the Inspire registry is. I will introduce the new version of the software that we are currently testing, and I will shortly report on some of the activities that we have started around the maintenance and implementation framework. So maybe just a quick question. Who of you is aware of the Inspire registry? Okay. Who has used it in some way or another? Okay, that's not bad. So I can go quickly over this. So it's a key infrastructure component that we have started implementing in the last 2 years or so. The main reason is that we want to have a component that provides unique identifiers for a number of different resources, like code lists, like documents, like Inspire themes, and so on. We want to consistently manage those resources and version them if there is a need for that, but also mainly to provide these identifiers so that they can be used to refer to the items, to the documents, to the code lists, to the themes, and so on. We have currently in the version that I'm going to be presenting a number of registers for code lists and their values, for feature concepts, for application schemas. We have transferred the Inspire glossary, which was available in the old version of the registry, to the new one. We have started a register on reference documents that are used in different Inspire documents, and we're thinking about other things like organizations, and we heard about that also in Germany. You have one for organizations as well, licenses, portrayal rules, encodings, and so on. The service is based on a software that is developed under the ARENA ISA action called Registry, or RE3 Registry. The current features of that software is basically we have multilingual, or of the service, we have multilingual content. So we basically use the content that we have in the Inspire implementing rules that is available in all the European official languages. And we've used that content to basically fill the registry. We also have a multilingual user interface supporting all official languages. There is support for filtering, searching, sorting, pagination. We have a number of different output formats. We now also support external references. That is mainly important for the code list registers, where we have a number of code lists that are being defined in other documents. So basically we support that as well. And in the latest version, we have added support for versioning of register items and more automatic register management. Future plans would be links to external extensions in the member states or in thematic communities, and I'll talk about that when we talk about the MIG activities. Related to that is also to define an API so that different registers can talk to each other and query each other automatically. And then finally, we would like to also define additional formats, mainly XML according to the ISO standard, but also SCOS RDF. As I said, this work has been funded by the ARENA ISA Action. If you want to know more about that, come and talk to Robin, who's in the first row here. The main goal of this project or this action is basically to build or to identify missing components that can be reused, well, they can be useful for Inspire implementation, but can be reused across sectors, and to develop any missing components that we identify. And the registry is such a missing component that we've identified quite early in the process, and we have done the implementation with Inspire in mind, but we've also tried to make it to build the registry in a way so that it can be used for other domains outside the core geospatial domain as well. So again, we've kept the data model quite generic, so it can be used for all kind of resources, not only those that are related to geospatial applications. One thing that is important to distinguish is the software and the service, because they often get a bit mixed up. So we have the registry software that we're developing as part of ARENA, and we have one instance of that software running that is the Inspire registry that we use as the primary test tool and implementation or deployment of that software to support the Inspire implementation. We have, in terms of organization, we have the registry with a number of registers, and each of these registers basically is just a simple list of items. But we also have some more complex structures. We have some registers that are hierarchical, so we have basically, or that are collection of other register items, and the code lists are a good example for that. So each of the code lists is one item in the code list register. But then there are a number, each code list contains a number of values that are included in that code list. But then also we have hierarchies as well, so code lists they can be parent code lists and child code lists as well, and the same for values. So that adds quite a bit of complexity to the system, but we're basically supporting all these requirements in the software. As I said, we have a very generic data model that is based on the ISO standard. So basically, we have a registry, which is the big system, and we have a number of registers in the registry, and each register basically consists of a number of items. We have a number of standard attributes for each item: the label, the definition, the description, and the status. The label, definition, description are all multilingual, so that was one of the core requirements that we had for the registry, is that we can support any text attributes that we have in all the European languages. And then we have a number of custom attributes, and that is basically the way in which you can basically configure this software to any kind of application that you would like to use. And we're using the custom attributes quite extensively for the Inspire registry, where each of the registers has slightly different requirements on additional attributes that we would like to manage together with the core attributes, like the identifier, label, definition. Actually, the identifier is not there, which is a big mistake. So the identifier is the main thing that should be there. It's the main attribute, because that is basically what the registry is all about, is to identify different items. This is a bit about technical details, which I cannot tell you much about, but if you're interested, send me an email and I will forward you to the developers. By the way, big thanks to our 2 developers that have been working on this over the last 2 years or so. So we have a new version out. It's finalized and it is deployed on a test server that is in the process of being put to the outside, made available to the outside. They're not quite there yet, but I was promised that next week it would be accessible from the outside. But you need to tweak a little bit your system to be able to access it. So there are some instructions on these leaflets, so if you're interested in testing this new release of the software that has new functionality but also has new content, I would invite you to come and pick up one of these leaflets and start testing it over the next months or so. We have basically simplified the software for reuse and personalization. We are supporting the ISO actions that Marcus kindly introduced before, like supersession retirement. We are supporting versioning now as well. We have basically worked a lot on how to input the data and update the registry in an incremental fashion. And we have implemented some data consistency checks. So basically, when there is an update or a versioning of an item, we wanted to be sure that the registry stays consistent. And that is specifically difficult with the hierarchical and the collection registers. A bit about the details. Basically, we have now a number of different modules in the software that allows the import of data using CSV files, and then basically we have another module that basically writes out the content of the registry into a number of formats that we support. And we basically, the registry is a file-based system, well, ultimately it's a file-based system in order to increase performance and to give fast access to the different formats. We've also implemented, as I said, an incremental update and versioning. So we have quite a detailed structure on how you can basically describe your updated items and whether they are supersessions, additions, and so on. And they can basically be uploaded to the system in an incremental fashion as well. And as I said, we have implemented some data consistency checks. So basically, whenever you update something, the system will test whether it's actually a valid update to support the register manager, and that's quite the same as Marcus presented. We want to automate as much as possible, help as much as possible the register manager in his task and flag potential issues or errors in an update in order to make sure that the registry content is actually consistent. So as I said, we're basically complete with the development, and we're now in the testing phase. So again, this is an invitation for you to try out the new version and to provide us with feedback, because that's really important for us. The next steps, as I said, is to implement RDF support, to linking to other registers, to experiment with that, new formats. We also would like to work on advanced export, so that you can basically, for example, save your search results as a file. And also to include the code list values from the technical guidelines, which was one of the outcomes of the workshop that we had in January on registers. Currently, the code list register only contains the values that are included in the legal acts. If you have any other suggestions for that, we'd also be quite interested to hear them. So if you do the testing and you have ideas for new features or additional things that you're missing, please let us know. That brings us to the work on the registers in the MIG. The basic issue that we identified is that not only at the European level we're building registers, but also in the member states, and we heard some examples, and we'll be hearing some examples today. We need to connect them in some way or another. If there are national extensions to code lists, for example, we should connect them to the central registry, and then there are no clear guidelines and ideas on how to do that. So we had a workshop in January where we invited a number of member states that are working on registries to present what they're doing in this domain. And we have agreed that we will form a subgroup of the MIG to work on these items further and to particularly look at a number of things. One was to provide feedback on the central registry implementation and to test new releases. The other one is to basically start developing guidelines or best practices for explaining on how to build registries in the member states and how to connect them to the EU registry. And for that, we basically were discussing in the workshop that we would like to set up a test bed between the JRC and a number of interested member states to see if we can connect actually the European, or how we can connect the European level registry with a number of member state registers. And there was some interest at the workshop from Germany and from the UK. And if you're doing something in your country and you're interested, please let us know. We also would like to set up what we call the registry of registers, where we basically have a central point at the European level that that you can use to find out where there are registries and registers in the different member states. As I said, we had the initial workshop in January, and we are about to set up this subgroup. And it should have actually already been set up, but it's my fault that I haven't got around to doing that yet. So that's it from me. Here are a few pointers. If you're interested, have a look, and please again pick up one of the flyers and join in the testing and provide us with feedback. Thanks very much. Any questions? Quick ones.
Well, hello. I'm Paul Jans from the Netherlands. You talked about this RDF publication you're looking at. What is the potential of this feature concept dictionary to become a real linked data vocabulary that is officially branded?
I think basically what we're looking at the moment is to use SCOS for the registries, plus maybe some extensions. I think the difficult things about the defining the RDF vocabularies is that is not for the standard attributes, which we can probably map to SCOS, but for the custom attributes that are different for each of the registers. So basically, we might have to come up with different vocabularies for each of the registers. If we want to map the full content of the registers, that's another discussion that we need to have. Maybe we only want to expose the standard attributes for each of the registers. My proposal would be in that domain is to come up with a generic RDF vocabulary that we can use for all the registers. And then, yes, we can use it to expose the terms from the feature concept dictionary, but it will not be, let's say, a fully fledged ontology, but it will be quite a simple RDF vocabulary that is basically an RDF version of what you can already have there in XML or HTML.
Yeah, Dirk Hinterlang from Germany. With Annex 3 themes, you will come across some external code lists, like EU Nomen, for example, for species names, which the specifications refer to. How are they introduced to this registry?
Sorry, yeah, as I said, we're dealing with the external code lists already. So basically, they are treated at the moment as they are treated in the legal act. So there is a reference to the external source. And this is basically why we have started this register on what we call reference documents. So basically, or reference sources, let's say. So if you go through the new version, you will see that we will have we have a list of or even in the existing version already, but we've changed it slightly in the new version. You have links to the external sources. The idea is also that where possible, we will try to include the external values for information directly here, but only for information because, let's say, the legally binding source is the external one. And also for some of the external registers, the lists may be quite long. So we will have to see if we can, how we can do that. But we have somebody working, looking into this topic. Okay, I think we need to move on to the next speakers. Thanks again for the questions. The next speaker is, well, the last one is you, Monica.
Okay, just to test.
Monica de Martino,
yeah.
from Italy,
yeah.
who's going to talk about environmental thesauri on the web and linked data.
Okay, hi. Okay, good morning. I'm Monica De Martino. I work at the CNR, and this talk is the result of activity that we have performed in eENVplus project with my colleague that is also here, Riccardo Bertoni, for the question. And in particular, we focus here on a state of play activity that we done concerning the environmental thesauri available on the web and the adherence to linked data. So just a fast overview, I want first to introduce the motivation, the outcome, the objective of this work, and I want to leave you the approach that we followed to catalog the terminology, the criteria that we have employed to evaluate the catalog. So, first of all, the general objective was to analyze available controlled vocabulary on the web for the environment and to analyze the reusability according to some criteria. Reusability can have a different exception, and in our work for the purpose of the project, reusability was in the sense of easiness to access and exploit the thesaurus content. In particular, we focus on two main aspects. One was the license. In particular, we look at the openness of license, and the linked data compliance, and we focus on the 5-star classification provided by Berners-Lee, and we stress a lot of the HTTP URI differentiability. So why we speak about Thesauri? Thesauri are today good tools to face with the problem of multicultural, multilingual issue, to provide a common terminology among the different community working environment. And it is employed in SDI, first of all, to uniformize the data description at the level of metadata compilation, and from the other side for data discovery. And its implementation rule recommended adoption of Thesaurus. They speak about the GEMET, but also about other Thesauri. So what happened now? That now today there are a lot of Thesauri. We go from HERT, GEMET, that are more general purpose Thesauri, and we move to more specialized Thesauri for specific data team that could be teased for the geology, or we have some database for habitat and species. And all these terminology have some sort of are heterogeneous in terms that they have different granularity, different structure, they are multilingual, they are popular or less popular, and we think that it's very important to try to exploit as much as possible such heterogeneity. And our idea came from a previous project that is closed, that was nature conservation, that aimed to develop a STI for nature conservation, and we thought not to use just a common terminology for the nature conservation, but to move in the direction of use of to exploit what already exists, and to crosswalk from one terminology to the other. And so we thought about a framework of Thesauri, and this framework is now going to be further developed in eENVplus for all the environment, try to cover quite all the environment as a team. So the property of such framework is that should be modular. That means that we can add the new terminology. Should be openness. Must be easily to extend each terminology that is inside. Interlinkable. We must be able to interlink the different terminology, and exploitable. That means that the vocabulary must be encoded in a standard way to be exploited by third-party application. And the technology today support us. This is why we choose the SCOS to encode the terminology and link data best practice for the publication. Now you can have already the result of our framework at this website, and the name is Lustre. Of course, it is going to be further improved. You will have another release at the end of the years. You have also inside some interlinking between HERT, GEMET, Eurovoc, Agrovoc, and so on. Sorry, there's some, okay. So let's come to the focus on this, on the part of the activity that we have performed in this last period. So we had a problem to identify which new terminology to integrate in the framework, and we define an approach that is characterized by three main phases. The first phase is the cataloging of the resources. The second one is which criteria to adopt to select such terminology, and the other how to evaluate. Let's go in detail for each of these phases. So the terminology source cataloging is a multi-step process where we have identified the resources in a different way. We start from an online questionnaire that have been developed, have been distributed among, not only among the partners of the project, most of them are national European National Agency for the Environment, but we developed these among all the community working in the environment, at least those that we reach, and we get 61 answers, and 23 terminology have been provided. Then we refine this list following 3 other sources. We look at scientific sources. In particular, we look more in a journal related to linked data. There is one that is had a special issue on a linked data dataset publication, and we look at the data hub, searching for thesaurus and with specific coverage. And among them, we look also what is available in the Link Open Data Cloud, even if the sources there are limited to the 2011. So here's the result. As you can see, we get 62 terminology, but 30 are Thesauri. The other are other kind of costs, could be code list or glossary, other type. And in the different column, we mark the source where they come from, and the fact that anyway one vocabulary has been identified from different sources, some way provide us a sort of importance of their usability, of their importance in the community. So now the problem was which of these, how to choose the proper one to be integrated in the framework, and we defined some criteria, but let's say more cold criteria. We thought about also multilingualism because one of the issues of the project, but for this we just limiting to take the number of languages that are declared in the sources, but in reality we have to do a more deeper work because not all concepts are translated. So we are looking at for each terminology the percentage of concepts that are translated in each languages, and also the problem of license or languages translation. Now we focus more on two criteria that are called criteria. One is the license, and basically we look at the openness of license. And the other is the linked data compliance, looking at the 5-star classification defined by Berners-Lee, and we look for the differentiability of the URI. So we go in deep in detail for these criteria, considering the linked data definition criteria. We start from the 5-star, and we stress a lot of the HTTP differentiability. That is a prerequisite for linked data, because from one side it allows us to check the authoritativeness of information associated to the concept. From the other side, it's useful to exploit mapping among terminology and discover new information. So Berners-Lee provides five star. We just introduce in the middle between 3 and 4 other two value, just because we found some terminology that are in RDF but are not with the URI differentiable, and the other are is something more that is RDF and SPARQL endpoint, but anyway the URI are not differentiable. So the same we did for the license. We consider what is available in literature about the common Creative Commons license, and there is a sort of classification. We have public domain license, the CC BY license, CCSA license, and other with more restriction, and some closed license, and other licenses that we define in progress or not found. And in particular, we focus to we give a range from 1 to 5. 5 is high usability, and we consider the first 3, as you can say, because open license without too many restrictions can be useful to completely reuse, transform a public resource. So now, coming to the third phase of our approach, we consider all the terminology that we have collected in the catalog, and we assign to them the one of the value according to linked data or according to the license. And in particular, we have identified 3 macro criteria for linked data Thesauri. So we have a linked data ready Thesauri. That means that they satisfy the 5-star level, and this is a Thesauri that are linked data, but that must have the differentiability for the URI. And we have a RDF ready Thesauri whose range is between 3 and 4. That means that it is RDF ready, but we have no URI that are differentiable. And we have other kind of Thesauri. Of course, we can, all this terminology can be integrated in the framework, but at the level of a category imply more efforts in doing this. The same we did for the license. So we consider open license, we categorize free category, open license Thesauri, that are those ones where the license is more or equal to 4. Then we have the license that is partially open with some restriction, and then we have closed the license where we have not we have some constriction in the reusability of the Thesauri. So this is the final result. Here you have on the road you have the license, and the column are the free category of linked data compliance, and you have the name of the Thesauri mapping in the correct box according with the value, and as a conclusion we can say that we have 45 Thesauri that are linked data ready. We have, we found that 6 are already in the interlinked with other third-party Thesauri. We have 33 Thesauri that are in SCOS and in RDF ready, but not with the HTTP URI differentiability. And anyway, we have a quite equal distribution among the license. So what we can conclude is that the thesaurus, the catalog of vocabulary that we have provided has quite a good level of reusability, because the 58% of thesauri are linked data or RDF ready and have an open and partial open license. So this is they can in some way reusable in our job, but anywhere in any way platform. We have some recommendation to improve the usability in our vision. That is, first of all, to pay attention to HTTP differentiability of concept, because in reality we have just 54 are not completed. And concerning the license, we found some difficulty in identifying the license, especially when we found the vocabulary in more than one sources, and sometimes it is missing the link to the license. So conclusion, we have a reference catalog that is a live catalog. It must not be exhaustive of all terminology for environment, but what we are able to collect until now. And if there are any suggestions, they are welcome. We provide an investigation approach with cold criteria for the accessibility, and in the future what we would like to go further in this analysis, to evaluate the languages, to evaluate the SCOS quality by using some known tool like QSCOS, and we are evaluating also the interlinking quality, and then we will think also to publish the catalog on the web, to leave this open to everybody, and of course some of this vocabulary will be integrated in the project in the Lustre framework. So for more information, you can look at the deliverable we provide in eENVplus project, and there is also a publication that will be presented at EcoVis 2044 in September. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Monica. I think we have time for a few questions. Anyone?
Hi, Monica. That's great work. And I wonder, did you consider also DBpedia, for example, which is kind of a big vocabulary?
DBpedia is already in our framework. We are interlinked with DBpedia.
Okay, I didn't see it in the schedule.
Yeah, sorry, because we already we consider more environmental Thesauri, and anyway, in the framework we have mainly the content is for the environment, and then we have interlinked Earth with DBpedia and with Agrovoc, other Thesauri. But if something is missing, please, you are welcome to tell us the vocabulary. Yes.
Thanks a lot also, Monica, from my side. I think it's very interesting work. What I was wondering, seeing your remaining or wish list to do in the near future, I think it would be very useful somehow to think about the potential connection of this deliverable with the work which is foreseen to be done under the SMIC subgroup for vocabularies and code lists. And I think it would be very useful also for Inspire users to put one column into the table and at least indicate which data themes could be affected by which vocabulary, just to help them when they are deciding, okay, we want to put some of our Inspire data as a link data, we should start with these vocabularies. I think that would be very useful.
In the beginning, our analysis, when we made the questionnaire, we asked for a data theme covered by the terminology. So in the deliverable, you have this information. Now in this presentation we focus more about the called criteria, but in the deliverable we will find this because it's what we needed in the project. Okay.
Okay, I think that's a good point, and there would have been my question as well. How could this feed into Inspire? And there is a proposed work item in the MIG to work on vocabularies, recommendations for vocabularies to use in metadata for the keywords, and that could be an interesting input for that group. And I think they're about to set, or there will be soon a call for a subgroup on that topic. So maybe he might be interested in that. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay. Then thanks again.
Thank you.
And we move to the last speaker, Andreas Abecker. Again, he will be presenting some results from the eENVplus project on software services exploiting the framework of Interlinked Thesauri for metadata management. And again, maybe that is something that we should be looking at from the MIG.
Hopefully, yes.
Good.
Thanks. So, thank you. Good afternoon. No, not yet. Good morning, still. What I will tell you is ongoing work, more or less a direct continuation of Monica's talk. I just figured out when I heard Monica's talk that one little step between her talk and mine is missing, but I will try to provide you with that information. The overall idea that Monica was presenting is again repeated here. We start from a number of existing open focused thesauri, focused in a language, focused in a domain, focused in one perspective on a domain. We publish them as RDF scores. We link them together And in that way, we have a network of Thesauri which shall together be more than the sum of its parts. Yeah? And the missing link is that Monica was just presenting the work on the content, yeah? Which Thesauri could go into such a framework. What she didn't mention yet is that CNR Imati has already implemented more or less, look at Ricardo, 100% or 80% of this software framework, which practically provides you a Sparkle endpoint to assess these interlinked Thesauri. And now the question for my company, for our part in the project was how to make use of this Sparkle endpoint in an inspired, user-oriented way, completely transparent with respect to the back end, yeah? Because an end user normally is not really interested in posing Sparkle queries. So the basic idea is just that we think interlinked Thesauri can support all steps, all activities in dealing with metadata, which means creating, editing them, validating them, maintaining them on one hand, searching, querying, discovering data or services described with metadata, referring to this Thesauri on the other hand, and in both use cases, creation and searching, also sort of an explorative search, a browsing through the conceptual space spent by the Thesauri. If you are not so confident with a specific domain, if you are not so an expert in an area, it might make sense when you search data or when you index data to try to browse through the terminology to better understand what's going on and what could be used or what could go on. So one basic principle in eENVplus is that although many parts of the project provide open source implementations, reference implementations, nevertheless the major part of the project tries to provide services which shall be used by everybody. Which means what we intend is that the users keep to work with their client software they have for metadata editing, for CSW, SGO portal, whatever, and that these people who implemented that software can access our Thesaurus knowledge through a set of well-defined REST API-based services, such that everybody could make his or her client software more intelligent by accessing the Thesaurus knowledge. And this means this API allows you to assess a couple of Thesaurus exploitation service modules that are now in the specification stage, and we just started implementation a couple of weeks ago. Will hopefully step by step made public in the upcoming summer and autumn. And of course, the purpose of all that is that here a user works as always, but with a more intelligent interface. This higher level of intelligence comes from accessing through the REST API to these services, and the services then are implemented in this exploitation server, which translates them to the appropriate series of Sparkle queries and processing steps. And here, this is then the interface that CNR Imati provides to the interlinked Thesauri. So this is the basic idea. A couple of remarks. On one hand, for all those who are not yet so familiar with SCOS, have a look in the documentations. There are many, many introductions, primers, etc. The conceptual model behind is you can more or less express everything that you can express in a normal thesaurus. You have concepts. Concepts are referred to by terms, lexical entities, lexical labels. Normally you say this is the preferred lexical label which should be used for indexing. These are alternative labels which are sometimes or could be used, synonyms. There are also sometimes hidden lexical labels that should not be used but should be known to the software, for instance misspellings or old-fashioned terms, etc., etc. So this is the space of labels. Then you have the typical broader term and narrower term relationships. You have also some association relationships, typically as is related to, just a vague association, and something more not relevant for this talk here. But of course, this is a data model. Whether you really have all this information depends on the content of the thesauri brought into the framework, of course. Okay, this is the first step. Then, as I said, we will provide some exemplary implementations, but in the ideal case, other people offering metadata management would access the thesaurus framework through the services and thus extending their software. What we will do at the prototypical level in the project is that we will build a simple metadata editor within the project, that we will prototypically extend the development version of the GRC Gear portal, and that we as DISI will experiment with these extensions to our metadata management products. Another thing, if you would have a closer look in our specifications, call to us in the coffee break or having a look at the open documents, you might have the impression that some of these services are complementary, redundant, abundant, unuseful. Yes, right, this is on purpose, because if I want to make happy everybody, I have to be aware that not everybody has the same requirements, and the best way how to exploit thesaurus knowledge in a practical environment is very, very much depending on the typical kind of users, the overall software environment, the typical kind of content. So we want to provide a superset of one specific institution could use. Yeah, for instance, if I'm a Portuguese public servant and should create metadata in English, it might be useful for me to see translations or definitions of terms. If I'm an English native speaker, it's probably not so useful. But if I'm an English biologist and I am in a border area of my topic and I have to think about geology, geology thesaurus may be useful again for me. Yeah? Or your software environment, if you have a very, very clever search engine, it may be sufficient to use it as it is and to have a very clear, small indexing. But if you have only a very simple full-text search, it might make sense to extend your indexing terms by several redundant information like synonyms, etc., just to make sure that some metadata record will be found later on. So these are differences in the environment that we want to cater to to some extent. And technically, of course, this means that we aim at a very flexible framework where many, many things can be configured or parameterized at runtime. So To give you a little bit an idea of how this could work in practice, just the most simple example at the beginning, if I create keywords in a metadata record. The very simple thing a tool could do for me is like in Google, I start to type a word and I get possible completions. Could be useful to make my indexing faster, more error-free, give me new ideas. All this is possible. It has not to be useful, and it may be completely unnecessary if your tool has just a pull-down list. Yeah, maybe unnecessary, maybe useful, or if you are in this situation, you have to create metadata in an area where you are not fully confident with. It may be useful to see translations, to see definitions, to see product terms and error terms, just to find the best point in the thesaurus to hook on. Maybe useful, not necessarily. Another thing, if you have already metadata set, or if you are working with old metadata and try to maintain it, it may be useful to have an automated validation routine, which automatically, or as a suggestion to the end user, creates sort of a normal form. Yeah, replace some unusual terms by the preferred labels, replace terms from one seldom used thesaurus by this exact same concept in Gamut or things like that. All this is possible, of course, if you have these interlinkings accessible. Yeah, this is what I mentioned already. All these things cannot only be done at your fingertips, yeah, at runtime for manual interaction, but also as an automated routine running over some metadata database, for instance. Make it a little bit more complicated if I'm thinking about searching and discovery of data services. Mock-up, okay, but should be easy to implement. We will see whether it works in 2 or 3 months. I start to type, I see the system says, okay, ICE, icicle, iceberg, ice cube, glacier. Glacier, why? Okay, this seems already to happen something behind the scenes. Could be words you're interested in. I say, okay, interesting, but I don't know what the glacier is, just give me the definition. If it is in a thesaurus, of course I can hover it and see what is the definition or how it is situated, located in a thesaurus. Then I can say, okay, what I really want to have is just ice. Now search for metadata records with the word ice. And then your search engine could, for instance, look for synonyms, for matches in other thesauri, for translations, could expand the query by all these other terms and could then come up with a couple of metadata entries which are relevant for your query, but which do not contain at all directly this word ice. Yeah, all this is not new at all in semantic search, but you have to do it, and you need the thesaurus knowledge to be able to do it. And again, all this may be nonsense in a concrete application example. It depends on your search engine, on the content. Yeah, for instance, if I can't understand Icelandic, I may be not interested in Icelandic resources. Yeah, so this is something we have to make configurable. Only search for terms in these 3 languages. Only search for terms in these 2 thesauri, etc., etc. All this, of course, can be configured. Last use case that I mentioned, also mock-up. Here it's again relatively clear what should happen, and the challenge will be in the upcoming months to implement it in an ergonomic, user-oriented manner. This browsing through conceptual space. Yeah? I have here soil, for instance. This is more or less a part of the knowledge contained in Gamut about soil, which says here are some narrower terms, here is the broader term. I could also ask for the definition of soil in Gamut. I could ask for the translation in all languages or in one language or in a specific language. I could ask for related terms in Gamut and then expand that one, etc., etc., and in that way browse through this conceptual space. More interesting is, if I have a set of interlinked thesauri, I could now ask for matching terms in other thesauri, and could see that somebody said soil in Gamut is the same as soil in earth, and now in earth we have these broader terms and narrower terms, definition, translation, etc., etc., and the earth is done from a completely different perspective, so it looks completely different. Yeah? May be confusing, may be very useful, depends on your use case. Okay, this was the functionalities we intend. We have specified. We are just implementing. Very few words about the implementation. I think the architecture is not really interesting for you. One short remark for the specialists is that we found it useful that we give back not only strings for terms, but really an object with the URI. This seems to fit in the Inspire implementation rules, because we can write it again as a string. An example for one operation that our services will have is get relatives. When I said which parameters could be relevant here, of course relatives of which concept, maybe how many are interesting, only the first one or the 10 or all, in which thesauri to search all or only a subset, which service module to use. This is a little bit too technical for these 20 minutes. Easier and maybe also pretty interesting. Am I interested only in specific languages? Again, in implementation detail, since the same requests will be provided by many service modules, there will be module-specific extra parameters which can then be encoded here in this last catch-all case. This would look like, we have very similar here. I have a get relatives request. This is the URI of soil in Gamut. Here's a part of the response which says, here's the broader term, pedosphere. Here is the one of the narrower terms, soil type. We had also to build a little object for the relation type. This is how it works practically. Okay, in conclusions, what we were aiming at from a software point of view is to have a maximum flexibility in our Thesaurus exploitation framework. All the rest must be seen in the piloting phase in the third year of eENVplus. What is really necessary, what is usable, what is not. In principle, of course, a set of interlinked thesauri can support multilinguality, broader and deeper domain coverage, cross-domain services. That's for sure from a technical point of view. For the practical point of view, we have to see. Okay, I think that's it for the moment. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Andreas. Some quick questions for Andreas before we have kind of final wrap-up.
Lunch.
I have a question. Around the services and the interfaces that you defined, have you had a look at other similar initiatives? For example, I know in Australia, for example, they have developed a vocabulary service called SysVoc. CSIRO? Not looking at something like
not
that?
really, but now this is an interesting question to
I
have a
can
look
give
at
you
it.
a pointer to that because I think it's interesting if we are having more and more vocabulary services out there, would be great if they use the same query interface.
Yeah. In the midterm, even a standardization of this access makes much sense. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, then I would like to ask the speakers to come up here. Because since you are all so much on time, we have 10 minutes to go. Me as a chair, I have a number of questions to answer actually, to report to the plenaries. We had a number of questions from the speakers already in their talks, and I know that you have one as well. What I would like to ask you some ideas on what works, what are the major achievements. Okay, we heard that from the speakers. But more importantly, what could work better? What are the big obstacles in the area of registries, of vocabularies, of Thesauri, maybe used for metadata? What are the big stumbling blocks that you still see that we should be working on between the four of us, or in Inspire in general? And what are the opportunities maybe where we could work? What are the features that you would like to see in some of these softwares that were presented? What are the things that you cannot do that you would really need to do, would like to do, and what's keeping you from doing that? So just some ideas from the audience. And then you can ask your question.
Can I ask a generic question first? Sure. I think our colleagues are doing fantastic work here, but I want to preface it with this, but how close are some of these technologies to your daily work or to the activities that you're doing? Do you recognize this immediately as benefits, or are you still seeing this as being quite far from where you're working? So how many people, show of hands, this is quite close to the work that they're doing and they're very interested? Okay, this is good. This is good news.
We should have taken a picture.
Yes, we'll do that after. No, because I think that's quite an important step to make here. That this group should be a group that's going to be able to inform. So going back to Michael's question.
Just very short observation. I think from my personal perspective, actually I just want to make my work easier and solve my task I have on my to-do list. And one of the super urgent question and expectation from this registry and all stuff around work is actually provide as soon as possible some quick win examples how this concept can help to some concrete real life situations. One is really for the geodomain, that's very important, but also the reason why I asked this first question, how we can communicate with other domains, because we have relatively quite a huge amount of digital stuff out there, and for them, the rest of communities, actually they are on one hand not aware what they can do with their stuff if they will build or link it with the geospatial stuff, and vice versa. We can also sell better our work to attach our data with some additional content. So I would call for some really short time evidences that maybe this very complex topic can be sold in an easy way. I know it's not easy task, but yeah, also from our side we will try to do our best. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Other views, ideas?
Yes, only a short note. I think for my work it's important to have a solution for the code lists, yes, and also for the namespaces. Mm-hmm. This is regarding to the first presentation. Right.
Referring to your question, what should be the biggest issue in future for using these things? And I refer to my experience also in the thematic working groups where you had not so much discussion about technical issues around what kind of vocabulary around, but the discussion is mostly, what do I have to use, or what are the experts are going to agree upon, which is as a definition in the different vocabularies and the different thesauri. So probably, and I'm not sure that is an easy solution to find, and I'm sure this will help if you make some kind of federated structure in coupling thesauri all around the world. But I think that's the big challenge in the future, to see how can you overcome that gap.
Okay, thank you.
Jari Reini from National Land Survey of Finland. In our national SDI, we are interested in using what you've been working with, and I would like to see somehow collaboration with ISO TC211 when it comes to APIs, that you would follow to work with ISO Registry service standardization, and it would be then standards driven, not any proprietary APIs.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, but it requires a lot of extra work and time, as you may know. So yeah, well, we can. I mean, I think we can definitely. I mean, if there are any outcomes from the Inspire work on that topic, I think we can definitely provide it as input to the ISO work, and we've tried to provide feedback on the revision of the registry standard as well, based on our experience. So hope that helps. Okay, Marcus, you had a question.
Yeah, maybe it's very simple to answer. Actually, I'm looking for someone who uses code lists and SCOS formats in a daily work. Does anyone do this? You. Oh, there's a short way to you. Yeah, in the same hotel.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Then I would like to thank you all again for the nice presentations. Again, if anybody's interested in testing the new registry release, please pick up a leaflet in the front here, and have a good lunch. Thank you. Bye-bye.